Before we start the panel, we'd love to ask everyone a question. Is this your first AI event throughout the week? Raise your hand. Okay, so we still have some fresh audience here. I think most of us have at least gone to 3 AI events and then 4 happy hours. But I think this one should be the best because Jack is the best. And we have the best panelists here today. Han is the CEO and co-founder of Blue Whale. I will give him a bit more time to introduce his protocol. It's pretty consumer facing, so I think it's easier for people to understand, and especially if you are from the Web2 background. And then we have Sean, the founder and CEO of Prodia. So Prodia is more AI infrastructure company. And we will need to let Sean to educate us on, the nitty-gritty of AI and Web3. I think probably 90% of us here, just like hop on the bandwagon of the buzzword of AI, but we actually do not know what's going on in there. So let's use this opportunity, the next 30 minutes, to learn from the two founders and also ask great questions. Why don't we get started with a short introduction of yourself and your protocol?
Sure. Very excited to be here. At Blue Whale, we are building a personalization protocol on the blockchain. What it really means is an infrastructure that allows you to analyze user insights and help every consumer-facing app to be able to target, to understand, and as well as serve better products, services, and assets to the right users. And so we have been around for the last 2 years. My background, I actually did AI in 2011 and 12, so at the time nobody cared. Graduated from Berkeley, ended up working in a large company writing consumer prediction models, which means also like AI that understands users. Ended up doing 2 startups in the Bay Area. If you're already there, you got to do startups. And then decided to abandon AI in Web 2 and then go into AI plus Web 3. And my honest belief is that the only way of creating an AI that is not going to eradicate us is probably going to be the decentralized way, and that's why I'm here.
Hey, I'm Sean, founder and CEO of Prodia. A little bit about us. We have the world's largest, essentially GPU DPN network for AI. So we run a lot of the underlying infrastructure for both Web 2 and Web 3 apps out there that are doing generative images and other generative models. As you know, kind of AI has exploded in the last just 12 months. And a lot of people are really having trouble getting the infrastructure. You have, for example, ChatGPT going from a couple hundred users to 100 million in 2 months, right? And so a lot of these companies that are actually building these really cool apps are really struggling to get capacity and build the software to be able to serve these amazing apps that we use. And so we know how to build some of the largest compute networks in the world using incentivization and tokenization. And so we're really seeing, again, a lot of these applications of Web3 infrastructure is perfect for the massive demand that's in AI. So we do that for a lot of Web 2 companies and Web 3 companies. But we're seeing that, hey, it's just mining all over again, but like an actual useful use case that people can use and earn as well and participate. So yeah, it's been quite an exciting time.
I'm actually curious, am I allowed to ask questions? Do you do computing as well, like decentralized computing, bring down costs, like compared to AWS and stuff?
Yeah. So the normal kind of companies that we work with is the companies that reach some level of scale in their business. So if you've heard of on the Web3 side, like MyShell, they're a really popular application, 1 million users. ChangeGPT. A lot of people start out using these services like AWS or others, and they have this massive growth. And suddenly they're looking at a bill that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? They can't get like the capacity and these kinds of things. And so we come in kind of on the inference on the compute side and say, hey, we can push this to a decentralized network. We can increase performance. We can make it so it scales well and doesn't crash like in the middle of the day when you have more users. And by the way, we can reduce the cost by 50 to 90%, right? And so we really help them on the infrastructure side. Previously to this, I did storage, STRJ. It's a large decentralized cloud storage network. And so my team has a lot of experience on the decentralized infrastructure side. And so we kind of try to pass that to the other end companies just to have them not experience the same problems that we've dealt with and have solved. Because it's very hard to scale. I mean, look at ChatGPT. They raised billions of dollars, and look how much times that goes down, in a week. So making that easy is what we do.
But cool.
The first question I have is actually for Han, because I think there are a lot of data analytics platform in Web2, and then recommendation function is like a core feature of most consumer-facing apps we're seeing nowadays. So I guess my question is, why does it have to be on blockchain? And is it more like the Web3 helping AI or AI helping Web3? And how do you deal with things like scalability, data privacy, and censorship features of your product?
That's a great question. So I would say, before we were doing personalization in Web2, and we were serving companies like Disney, like NBC, Vivo, those kind of guys. They had hundreds of millions of users. And as you might know, right, like personalization you can only get right if you have hundreds of millions of users. Now, when I got into Web3, I realized that most of the companies don't have that many users. Now, if you don't have that many users, then you don't have enough data to train AI to be smart enough to give the right recommendations or the right search results and whatever, right? So personalization is much broader than that. What we thought to ourselves when we started looking into the Web3 space is like, hey, if all the user behavior data is sitting on chain, and you are able to actually build a layer that is cross-chain, combining all kinds of user behavior and transactions and data that is all over the place, then you should be able to supply a infrastructure that can power the next generation consumer apps without them acquiring the same amount of users like TikTok. But then you would make them as smart as TikTok from day one. And that's kind of like the premise we went into Web3 with, because if we can train on open data sets that are on-chain and then being able to supply that intelligence into the next layer, which is the application layer, then those guys don't need to spend billions of dollars like Facebook, like TikTok, or like Twitter did in order to acquire every single user one at a time.
So which blockchain are you built on?
So we started on Ethereum because there's the most amount of activity going on. Also, like in terms of data, like availability and access was much more easier for us to do. We are now scaling into Polygon. Looked into Solana quite a bit. Data retrieval in Solana is not that easy. Everybody must know that here in this room. But the thing is, like, for us, the future is going to be cross-chain for sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so kind of where we see the intersection of kind of the blockchain usage with AI is, you have these massive companies that we know of, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, that are spending billions and billions of dollars building out, data centers and infrastructure for AI. But we already know how, to build out these very large compute networks, Bitcoin and Ethereum and other examples. It's just some of the largest networks in the world. And the only way you can do that at a massive scale is kind of with token and token incentives. And so it plays a really important part in bringing the supply that everyone needs to fill this amazing demand for AI. And so it's really important for payments, it's really important for incentivization. And it's the only way that you can really build these things economically at scale. And so it's a very critical part of building these networks, building these infrastructures without really spending billions of dollars of CapEx for data centers when we have this compute resources available everywhere in our PCs, right, at home. And so the blockchain element, the token element really is an important part. This is the only way you can tie that together at scale.
Great. The next question, I want to start with Sean, and then I'm gonna just throw a bunch of fancy words to you, and if you can help us just tease out the logic and structure of these words, that would be super helpful. Okay, so AI training, AI inference, GPU, data center. Yeah, you can go from there.
I guess we should go over some definitions, perhaps,
Yes.
if that's helpful.
Yes.
So, yeah, there are a few buzzwords, like there is in the Web3 space, there is in the AI space, and so there's kind of two sides to kind of running AI. So one is the training, right? So you're taking very powerful GPUs that are very expensive. You've probably heard the term like H100 or A100. These are very powerful, expensive GPUs. You're using large data sets and training these amazing very powerful models like Stable Diffusion or Llama or these kind of base models that have a lot of capabilities in them. And then once you've trained that model, you have to run it, right? And so that's kind of in the AI side, that's called the inference side. So you're taking that model that you've trained on this large data set, you spend hundreds of millions of dollars training it, and then you're using essentially, AWS or Protea to run that model, millions and millions of times to serve millions of users. So those are kind of the two sides of AI in terms of definition. So there's model training and there's inference, which is running the models.
I think since you mentioned about AWS and probably Azure, so can probably give people like a understanding of how centralized versus decentralized computing might work differently.
Yeah, it's on the centralized side, it's very simple. The large cloud providers, they get a big data center building. They spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars stuffing them with computers and GPUs, and then they charge you lots and lots of money to use them. On the decentralized side, it's taking the same really GPUs that are available in your gaming computer or at home, and tying a lot of the stuff together with software to be able to run essentially the same text or image generation or video generation that these applications are doing. And it just ends up being a lot more economically sustainable and efficient when you do it in a more decentralized manner. Because those resources are already out there versus purchasing them new and running them at scale. So that's why a lot of people, they start out on the centralized providers and then they realize, oh wait, this doesn't really scale, this is not economically feasible, and they start looking to other options, and that's when they kind of find decentralized options.
What's the cost difference we're talking about here?
So normally, so cost is not the only component. So we see kind of centralized, decentralized 2 to 4x performance improvement. It's way easier to scale in terms of handling the load of some of these systems. And then on top of that, you're seeing anywhere from a 50 to 80% cost improvement. So it really makes a huge difference in terms of the user experience, the ability to support all these users, right? And everyone loves saving money, especially when they're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on infrastructure. So it's very important. Hits the bottom line.
So Han, as a protocol that might, in the future be deployed on Protea, like what are some concerns you might have as a founder?
A very good question. I think, I really love the concept, and I have met a lot of founders in the recent month that are doing decentralized computing, and the cost difference is incredible. Like, I had people come to me offering us the price difference to AWS, like 90% reduction. Insane. Now, my problem when I started introducing that to my engineering team was that my engineers are saying like, oh, it's great that they're saving you money, but then like AWS has us by the balls. No, it's true, right? I mean, like
you and everybody else.
Yeah, because AWS gives you $100,000 credit for free in the beginning. So your AI team starts building, and then after a couple of years of building and using that up, and now let's say like we are spending about $50,000 per month on AWS, the infrastructure that we have built over the last couple of years is very, very deep. AWS comes with like different plugins, very easy for my engineers to scale like different data pipelines or data processes. And then I tell them to move, and they don't want to move. And so that's kind of like the problem I run into. But I do believe like that those guys gonna win in the long term. But in the short term, it's been quite a struggle for me to sell it to my own team.
Yeah, I mean, we see this a lot. I mean, as I said before, I built out a decentralized storage protocol. And yeah, it was very difficult where people are like, oh, this is faster, better, cheaper, but I have all my data in AWS. It's cost me $1 million to move, right? So I think with some of these tools and products out there, we're finding that people love starting out on AWS. They get their credits, right? The problem is when they run out, right, and it just becomes so economically unsustainable and so painful that they're forced to do something else. And so I think this is where a lot of the tooling comes in, and a lot of kind of personalized support is like the easier you can make that transition, if you can actually have a dev like that supports you moving that over and say, hey, like we can make it, way faster or way more scalable, it can save you half the cost, but like actually helps you move over. I think that's very important in terms of the dev experience, the user experience. So that's why we've become the largest network, is because we've focused a lot more on just like the hand-holding that people need. Yep. It's because you're flying, this plane, right, and building it as you go, and you're trying to transfer over to another plane at 30,000 feet. Like, the more help you can get, the better it is. So.
I totally agree with that, and I think from a user perspective, it's very important that the engineers have an easy way of transitioning out. That means like your transition costs reduces to zero. If those guys can solve that problem, it will make everybody transition. The second thing that I think they need to focus on is go-to-market strategy. It's incredibly hard. If you look at how AWS, Google, and Microsoft has done it. Microsoft went top down, right? They went after governments, and then the government started telling everybody, you got to use Microsoft now. AWS is doing bottom up. That means like they're sending very aggressive sales teams after every founder and every startup that's out there. So for those kind of teams that are doing decentralized computing, I would recommend them to look into like what kind of go-to-market strategy can we use, how can we make the transition cost much less painful, and then also like how can we insert ourselves much more strategically into like the data process or the training process or the computing process, so that we can easily push the like the GCPs and AWS out of the pipeline.
Yep, 100%. I think another thing that's interesting is, I mean, you guys are not competitor to AWS or other, right? It's like we need to work together. I was working at McKinsey actually before crypto, working on a lot of like technology transformation projects. And I think the inertia I've been facing with the clients is they don't want to replace like a small bit of like a big chunk of the softwares they're using. So they actually prefer like a package solution as compared to, they need to let do everything themselves and then construct together. So I think that's like a popular word nowadays, modular, right? Like modularity. Like you want to like form like different branches with like other protocols and make it more modular for people to integrate.
But and that's the problem of the centralization, right? Like for example, on AWS you have a lot of modularized AI models. So you can run like recommendation model, you can run into like search, contextual search models. The biggest problem about modularization in the centralized world is that every module is like a black hole. That means like there's no way for you from outside to look into it and see why it spit out those results, versus like, for example, in the decentralized world where we have like a multiple different, like a decentralized computing, then we have decentralized model providers, and then we have like decentralized infrastructure that supports the entire scaling of it. And so I believe decentralized is the way to go, and it's probably much better because then you can look into every single model and tell yourself like, okay, it spit out this results because of this reason, and so I'm switching to another model very easily, and it no longer becomes a black hole for you.
Oh, I think before we ask Q&A, I have the last question for you guys is more on the crypto side of things. We'd love to learn about how you guys think about token incentives and how do you want to design the whole token structure and tokenomics. Yeah.
You want to start or should I start? Because yours is harder than mine. Like, so.
Yeah, so I mean, we could talk about tokenomics for next couple of decades, right? But I think it's at the base. It's very important for using these incentives for people to participate in the network, right? It's the only really way that you can do this at any scale. You need the token for the incentive to get people to participate in the network and incentivize them for providing these, very expensive, resources. So I think you break it down into simplicity. It's the only thing that we know that works at scale for incentivizing people to participate in these networks, and so that's what you need to use.
Okay, so on my side, I've been, this has been my biggest headache for the last year or so because we're launching a token in June. this year, and I had to set all the tokenomics right and stuff. But on our side, it's a little easier than on his side because incentivizing people for computing is hard, but on our side, we are trying to build a personalization layer. Now, the biggest advantage of a personalization layer is if the individual is willing to contribute more data by themselves. That means like, they're gonna add their Twitter to it, they're gonna add, their preferences to it, they add their music taste to it. Now their profile is making a huge difference in our AI model training. Right? So what we have come up with is an AI token that's going to launch and that's going to incentivize individuals in the retail space or consumers that have wallets to contribute that kind of information into our AI brain, and then they get tokens in response. And often those kind of information can either be sponsored like by us, we want to know about that part, or by the enterprise that's sitting on the other side of our market, which is like, they want to understand the users, they want to incentivize the users, and they're going to use Blue Whale in order to reach the users.
Thank you guys for the time and great questions.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.